All right, welcome everybody to episode 3. We are joined again by Jeff. We have been blessed with presence, as well as we're here again with RJ. Hey everyone, how you doing?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
So far so good. Indoors, but so far so good. Uh, okay. I thought Jeff was here, but Jeff is not. I'm just kidding. Jeff is here. So RJ, one thing that I meant to ask Jeff this last time, and it completely slipped my mind, and it was a little bit like the impetus as far as thinking about how these went, about and especially about these conversations about like starting it and wondering, what people's going on. So I guess the first question I have is, what if someone asks you, what did you do during the pandemic? What would your response to that be?
What did I do during the pandemic? I worked a lot on myself as a human being, I would say.
Ooh, okay.
Y- Yeah. And I think it's a time of great reflection because of how much time you can have alone
Okay.
right now. Um, I think that's the case for a lot of people, especially if you're kind of in a similar position as guys like us, mid-20s kinda millennials, right? Often, just out of college, either living alone or probably fairly independent. And yeah, it's just a lot of time alone. And there's a lot of also public discourse and just kinda like taking it all in and kind of evaluating your place in this world and how you can better yourself, I feel like. I've done a lot of that because I feel like there's been a lot of time for it.
I thought about that like when at a little bit at the beginning when it looked like when jobs started to close down and it was like, okay, the job hunt is full on, and then before realizing it's like, no, it's gonna be a while, like it's buckle up, like it's gonna be a little while, and like I had that realization of just like, oh, what can I do this and do this to make myself better. And I guess the things that I were thinking about were things that were maybe the things that are different approaches. Like for me it was more like physically doing, like what things could I physically go out and do that I hadn't been doing, what opportunities could I take advantage that I hadn't been. But all of that went out the window for me at a certain point when I realized like this is going to be much longer than anyone expected. But it sounds like to me you're talking more about like working on your like the mental aspect of working on yourself as a person.
Yeah, well, I think it's an especially difficult time, um, if you're not strong of mind.
Okay.
Um, Clearly, there's been a lot of talk about things like, the despair of the lockdown and all that, but honestly, I've kind of really been at peace through most of this. Um, and I think it's because I'm constantly self-evaluating, seeing how it's kind of like a pushing to be better personally. I feel like I'm getting too much into cliches here. And I want to get more specific, right? So let's say like, okay, I don't know exactly. I'm trying to go here. What was the question again? One of the things I've definitely worked on is not doing so much smoking so much weed. Obviously, I still need some work there. Um
It's funny
I'm
that
sorry,
this
is this a family friendly podcast? Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Anything goes. But it's funny because like this, it feels to me like I just like asked like a group of 4 different people who just did acid for the first time, like, how did it go? And you're like, well, there was a lot of empty time alone in my head, and I like it's have
Yes.
that vibe to me. But like, yeah, I guess I never. Again, another just waking me, just getting all kinds of woke up in here, RJ. But I never had considered like the comparison of being stuck inside, being stuck with a lot of people, like me, like stuck no longer like with the I was gonna use like the freeingness, but like the mental, like you're not, when you're at work, you're not stuck spinning gears all the time necessarily. You're just kind of thinking about what you're
Yeah.
doing, and so when that is removed as well, it's just like I see what you're saying, like this comparison between just like a acid trip gone wrong that you're just locked inside of. This is speaking to me personally at this point, but
Yeah, so actually, okay, you kind of freed something up on me. So yeah, very similar to an acid trip. I only done acid once in my life, but it was totally life changing. And this actually, in a very same way, feels very similar. Um, and why I say that is because like when institutions just kind of like the things you've trusted in your whole life just start failing around you, right? The whole idea of like having to conform to society feels a lot less necessary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's an expectation of people and expectation go to college, get education, get a good job, and then have this happy life, live this American dream, right? Well, in a lot of senses it's like, oh wow, the thing that we never thought would happen just happened. The whole world's a little bit nonsensical in the first place, and I can just be who I want. I don't have to be like, I don't know. It's almost like I think that the whole pandemic is allowing a lot of people to realize that, the long held truths that they had are either mythological or just kind of flawed in premise. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah, and there's a lot of exposing, so to say, is happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exposing yourself.
Exposing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's a time where everyone's got an opinion on something, so you are really starting to see where people fall, right? And
sorry about that, guys. We had a little bit of technical difficulties. Recording stopped, but we're gonna pick right back off. And so, what RJ was talking about really reminded me of this Italian proto-Italian Renaissance, Italian proto-Renaissance painting by Lorenzetti with this allegory of the good and bad governments. And on one side, you have one side of the painting is the city run and by a government. It has new order. It has some bit of specialization. The terrible sides of humanity are able to, there's some control on those. Also, the world as a natural element inflicts upon people and societies as a whole is able to be spread out amongst a community and shared. And as a result, the people are very happy. And then the other side of the painting, outside of the city walls, is showing how terrible, how animalistic, how hard life is without order, without government. And I think what you were reminding me is now we've gotten to the point now, say, from Renaissance here on out, and that society has grown into what we know today. And I think we're really realizing that what's happening inside of the city is not really different from what's happening outside of the city. Uh,
ah,
yeah, and I just like many, Italian Renaissance paintings depicted, it's really just about having your faith in this entity, whether it be at that time the church or whether it be current times the government. We've just had this expectation that oh, it's done so many good things that of course it's not doing any wrong today, and so I
yeah,
I think we're starting to see this aspect where governance isn't at the very least is failing the people currently.
mm.
Maybe not the whole anarchy angle, but at the very least, the current governance, at least in America, is beginning to fail the people.
Yeah. No, no. Kind of off that too is that I think all of us here, you, Jeff, and I, all consider us to a certain degree some sort of artist. And artists are really meant to reflect the times, right?
Mhm.
So like what I was saying, like we see where people are falling, and you want to be on the right side of the history as an artist. You want to make sure you're communicating the proper sentiments of the time. The not just the extremist views, but also the views of just what is America? Like what was the average American experiencing? What were their turmoils? What were their frustrations? What did they enjoy? That's the one thing I don't think many people are talking about the pandemic and the lockdown was just like, what did you enjoy about it? Where were you able to find light? And I've actually, like I kind of mentioned it, I turned into a very productive time in every way I could think of, really. Everyone always talks about that big project they'd do, right, if I only had the time, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if other people are, but, like, I feel like, "Holy shit, I have the time," and I'm actually, like, doing it, I have I'm kinda trying to speak the words into actions of the old, idiom.
this is actually something that I wanted to hear from both of you about. How is it, you've nailed it. How has this pandemic affected like your creative outlets, your creative the creative aspects of what you do? And like you mentioned earlier, like I think we all consider ourselves creators of some sort. What has that done to your creativity? Jeff, what do you find like RJ, you're going like you have this ample time, or like my side is I feel the opposite for some reason. But Jeff, what do you think?
Frankly, I think that I've found it very difficult to be creative during this period. I don't know if that's because I've been busy with work, but I've really struggled to put anything new, quote, on a page, if you will.
Yeah.
I think this the content that I have released during this time has been essentially just a rehash of old stuff. It's just been adjusting things that I've already done more so than actually creating something new and taking something from my brain to a page.
Yeah, I'm finding that same problem. I mean, it's a big relief to hear that, RJ, you don't have that problem. But I've been one thing that I've done the going through old work and assessing old work as well, and kind of going through seeing different things that I missed. But then at a certain like when it came to creating new things, there's also like this feeling. I think like I guess of guilt, like especially not just considering the COVID pandemic, but all of the other sources of turmoil in America that has been highlighted by what happens if people lose 2 weeks. Like everyone's always been wondering, like 50% of people live paycheck to paycheck, 75% of people have less than $1,000 worth of savings. So like the age old, not even that age old, but something I think people have been wondering for a while now is what happens when 2 weeks without income happens. Like what happens to people? And to me, like I have this, especially maybe not necessarily in the streaming aspect of things at all, but in the photography, in the art side of it for me, is there's this feeling of how could I be going out there and creating essentially not frivolously, but how could I be going out there and expressing creativity, expressing like it feels like a point of privilege, like a huge point of privilege that I feel like is to be taken advantage of, or in not the positive sense that so like going out and taking photos, exploring, and especially COVID, that's kind of the opposite what you should be doing, going exploring. But it feels like there's this bit of guilt associated to it that I kind of can't get over.
That's super interesting. And I kind of I like to stay in contact with any person I've worked with creatively in the past, and I've actually been reaching out to some of them. And what's interesting is that it does seem to be that your guys' sentiment is the overriding one amongst creative people. That the kind of the it's like frivolous is a good word, like you said. Um, but almost like some people maybe are feeling like, how could I be creative in this time when such need for action, you know?
Yeah.
There's such need for change and they need to be a part of that change. And I understand that. But I also am one of the people who really does believe that a lot of great like art and creativity is born of a struggle. And I've always seemed to strive or like, I don't know, work well in those spaces.
Okay.
And I feel like, bro, you want to find your voice creatively, right? But also, you can't find your voice until you've actually experienced something. And I feel like this is really allowing us to experience something. And if you just open your eyes and observe, you can kind of that's kind of what I'm trying to do is observe as much as I can, document as much as I can, because even if I'm not creating something original, I want to be able to revisit this time in the future because I know this is going to be such a nexus point of future creativity, right? This is going to be a touching stone in anyone's life that was born, after 1990, right? Even 19, going back even later than that. So, um, people our age, mid 20s, didn't really get the full emotional effect of what 9/11 was for our country. And this is kind of a similar type thing, and except in that it's not so much bringing us together, but tearing us apart. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, in Yeah, exactly. And I think for a particular struggle that I've had is a lot of my work hasn't been. I enjoy entertainment for the sake, like for the sake of entertainment. Something like
Mm-hmm.
something that is comical, not because it exposed to truth or something ironic, but just like is more of an escape. So I think when I look at my body of work. I think most of it is a comical thing. It is most of it isn't something like you're saying that it's not born of struggle. And so I guess the other aspect of it, I guess it's a little bit of uh uh what's it called, imposter syndrome of saying this is the time, like you're saying, this is the time for action, this is the time when work really needs to be speaking to people and it needs to be speaking itself. And if I'm not going to make that, there should that it's doing a disservice to the medium, to anybody who views it, and to those people who are out there trying to get the voice out there of change, of what needs to happen, or highlighting the things that are the problematic, the things that are tearing people apart currently. And so I there is, maybe that I think that's more of a personal thing, though, because I think a lot of people, most artists, like you're saying, I think they consider themselves making work more in the more in the time, more in the current issues, and so I think because I don't always stick to those, that it feels even more, I guess, frivolous. It feels even more unimportant that it happened. But
Mm.
I can't. Then it goes to the difference between what's the excuse between that and just being out of practice.
Understandable, yeah.
Another thing that I find difficult is uh, so much of any kind of creation is a social. It is a group event. So much of anything, even the what I find like photography is it could be a pretty individualistic pursuit. But that being said, there without without seeing other people, without talking to other people, without being in places to look at the same exact thing, without going and having the exact same experience together, I find that it is difficult to think about, especially I think about where I am. I'm now just a few months over a year out of graduating with graduating art school, and so to go from that jump between like graduation, find your person in terms of professionalism, find yourself as a person in terms of what do you create outside of school, and then now there's like the which is, I feel like, kind of hard enough on its own, but then when we compound both, the elements of just being in the pandemic, and then the other element of all of the crisis, like all of the crisis happening, from government to social to just racism in the country. And so it's I think it's like you're saying, you spoke about finding your voice earlier. I think it becomes, I think a lot of people's voices are changing right now, and both personal voices, both artistic voices, both on on the internet. So I think that, like most things coming out of this, we're going to see both from individuals, myself, and other people, we're going to see a huge influx of creation. Uh, but I think it's been somewhat good. Like particularly like with what you do, like filmmaking is such a group activity that, and all pretty much all filmmaking around the world has come to a halt, and it's
Mm.
really allowed us, like you're saying, to examine what's happening. And I think that currently there's a lull, right? That currently there's a lack of creativity, a lack of creation in general. But I think that following this lull, there's going to be a huge explosion from people who thought, how can I make people's lives better by just entertaining them for a moment for the escape? And then there's going to be that overwhelming wave of experiences of what people saw, what people felt during this time, that I think will be just phenomenal for all kinds of art.
Right. It's kind of touch on the film thing of it all. It's not my favorite film of all time. It's considered one of the greatest, but Apocalypse Now is an absolute masterpiece of a film front to end. But the thing is, there is no Apocalypse Now without the Vietnam War. We don't get that great piece of art, which is a reflection upon a time, without kind of the human awfulness that comes from times of struggle. And
Yeah,
it's terrible to try and I'm not trying to revel in it. I'm really not. But I'm just trying to be very honest with myself about how I feel about everything. So that when I do
okay,
need to revisit this stuff in the future, I know where I was and what I felt. Does that make sense? In a way, it's almost like I've been documenting a lot, almost kind of like a journal, which I've never really kept in my life. But I
yeah,
just on my phone notepads, I'll have so much on my mind about the news of the day because there's every day it's just a barrage of different things that you can barely keep your head on, right? It's just on a swivel at this point. And I'm just trying to just be honest with myself about how I feel about the stuff, and I'm trying to be honest with the people around me about how I feel too. So, yeah, this is kind of getting into some like I don't know, real weird philosophical place, but
I think we all saw that coming.
yeah.
But Jeff, how do you feel the pandemic, or just whatever it is, current state of events has an impact on your future?
Mm, that's a good question.
Whether it just be specific,
That's
as
a
we're
good
like
question.
we've been talking about it in the context of creation, but like so maybe for the context of your creation, but also I feel like there's going to be like you're I feel like you're in line for a ginormous promotion. Like we talked about this like last time. You're constantly up working, and like you're always like responding constantly at all points in time. So I feel like on that side of things, that's got to be coming, right?
I mean, I guess from a work standpoint, it's just sort of like I don't know that anything's really different because I think for the most part, everyone that I work with is working more also. So it's not like I don't know, maybe I'm setting myself apart or maybe I'm not, but it's more just like we're all doing more work, and I do expect that at some point things will be back to normal. And and normal, I guess, in the sense of normal course of doing the same amount of work as usual. And I really think that 5 years from now, in terms of a professional standpoint, I could be wrong, but I would be surprised if my employment slash professional situation is different than it would have been without the pandemic,
Okay.
if that
In
makes sense.
in what way?
I just don't see it. I think there are two schools of thought as far as how much this is going to affect people. If this is an I Am Legend situation where we get a vaccine and then everyone turns into zombies, that's obviously the far end of the spectrum of what could happen. But assuming that a vaccine comes out in the next 12 to 18 months, it works, people can go back to going out to eat and going places and not wearing masks, which I expect that that's going to happen at some point. I don't know if that's 6 months from now, 24 months from now, I don't know, but I expect that at some point that will happen. And if that's the case, I think that after things go back to normal, things will really just go back to normal, with the exception of maybe I get to work from home more because people have realized that you don't actually have to go into the office to work in most cases.
Yeah, do you so you just said you do, and I think you gave even a timeline with, I think you think even within 5 years we will be back to a society of basically like 2018, before the world before COVID.
Yeah, I do think that. I do think that. I think maybe there will be differences as far as what businesses are still around
Yeah.
because some businesses are obviously being tested by this. Businesses that maybe people are realizing, oh, we can live without that. Some that we can't live without. I mean, restaurants are still necessary, but some restaurants are not going to survive this. A lot of brick and mortar stores are not going to survive this. Have already not survived this, I should say.
You know, the the plague lasted 400 years.
True, yeah, but is this the plague though?
Well, I think the specific thing that scares me is everyone that not maybe not everyone, but I hear people being like, at a certain point, even if it does wipe through, as killing as many people as possible, we'll achieve herd immunity. But there was like that town, there was like in Spain, 60,000 people. They just completely were like, we're gonna allow them to go for herd immunity. That's what we're gonna do in the city, and they didn't achieve it. They achieved less than 10% immunity, and so basically COVID just swept through them. And I think it's possible if it's any if I think if we handle it the way that we're currently handling, which is to do nothing. I think that this is going. This is not going to be as short as 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm again no virologist. I'm none of the sort. Right. I'm just a dude who went to art school, but I feel like at the same time, like just by seeing the mismanagement in our country and the exceptional management in places like New Zealand, that if we continue on our trend, I don't think that this is going to be a 5 years and we're back to normal thing. At the very least, maybe it takes 5 years, the entire 5 years to get back to normal. Instead of just saying, but I think that if we see it continue, just laissez faire, I think we have some serious plague type of problems.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I also will not claim to be a virologist. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I know what's going to happen.
No, we're gonna title this one three virologists talk about the pandemic.
3 virologists on philosophy.
What kind of okay? I guess this is something I should ask. So, like, obviously, I'm most interested in when I can be on a film set next, right?
Yeah.
Or when I can be in a office pitching an idea, right? And it's already looking like LA has shut the entertainment business down until 2021. Like
Yeah.
already, like this was decided back in like April. And so I'm kind of operating on a timeline of like my life pretty much on hold at this point until March 2021. That's kind of my current working frame, like current working timeline. Obviously, that could very easily shift with any sort of development, but I feel like that's probably like a reasonable time frame to be aiming for at this point. I don't know. How are you guys viewing it? Are you hunkered down for a longer term type of thing? Like it seems like Jeff's maybe more in the on this side with me. Like 2021 sometime it'll just kind of vaccine goes and assuming it goes well, back to normal, right?
I mean, I've been thinking about like the two things that I've been thinking about, like especially when it comes to bringing in money, have been what can I do either from home or what can I do alone and run myself. Like some things I've been thinking about, like power washing. I've been thinking about like getting a power washer going around and owning the power washing business of one. But I've been just kind of thinking about. I think when we went through the recession, the Great Recession, that people really started to think about what jobs can I do that will always have a demand no matter what. And I think that people now are going to be thinking, what jobs am I going to be doing where I don't have to depend on being close to other people? At least that's what
Yeah.
what I'm thinking, and especially I get that not everyone has like if I didn't have a computer, like the computer that I do have, I don't think I could be like, oh, maybe I can find something at home. And so I get that isn't for everyone, but that's been my thing moving forward, especially when it comes to when it comes to specifically monetary aspects.
Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting for sure. Kind of, I don't know why I'm thinking this off of it, but what are the like real human things that you guys have been missing during the pandemic? Like, what's the subtle things that make us like, you know, a human being, what do you miss about? Is it handshakes? Is it getting a haircut? Is it just like going out to dinner with a large group of friends? Is it going to the bar and trying
I
to hook up? Like, because like obviously hookup culture, if you're a single guy or a single woman at this time, or
Yeah, it's been months.
it's pretty much not non-existent. So any sort of relationship you're going to form right now is essentially just a digital one, right? So um how
For
have you guys
me,
been feeling maybe just about even making friends in the time of COVID?
well, for me, the only, like, literally the only thing I miss, quite frankly, I'm pretty introverted. I could be fine living in a hole that has internet and computer. That's totally good with me. If it's got Discord, that's an even bigger plus. But at the same time, I'm very happy about not having to interact with people as much. The one thing I miss, smoke sessions. I can't share. You can't share anything anymore. That's the one
Yeah.
thing I miss. I like. There's something so communal about passing, to the next person and then seeing it go around the circle. Like that's been the number one thing. I think there is something. I think for other people, it could be like, I think going out to dinner or like going eating with friends, I think is a substitute for that. For other people. But for me, it's been completely like the passing of the joint.
Interesting.
But now again, like, it's like one of the things that, like, I've realized that, like, what, like, the two things that I'm doing now, I'm never sharing, and I'm never not wiping things that come back from the grocery store. Those are two things from the pandemic life that are gonna stick with me. I don't pass anymore. Just thinking about the mouth.
Interesting for sure. What about you, Jeff? What have you been missing?
I'm also introverted, but I miss I would almost call it the background noise and familial feeling of society. I
Mm,
feel like I feel like when I go places or when I'm doing something, it's almost like watching a movie where there are no extras. I mean,
yeah.
you look at a restaurant and no one's there. You get takeout from a restaurant, there's no one inside. There are no cars in the parking lot. It really feels like you're watching a movie and there are no extras anywhere. It feels wrong. I'm so used to going to a restaurant, not necessarily with a large group of people, maybe just with one other person, maybe by myself. I'm used to there being people around. And you're just people aren't going places. People aren't doing stuff. I mean, I'm not going places or doing stuff either, but it just feels, and there's almost a feeling of distrust almost. When you
Yeah.
go out to the grocery store, it, I mean, you're all there shopping for groceries together, more or less, right? Now it's like if you accidentally pass by close to someone, they look at you like you have the plague. It's just very, it doesn't, it's just the feeling, I would say.
Are you guys having the problem specifically? I'm having the problem specifically at the grocery store, where in my state they have now mandated masks are mandatory. Like, in, especially like out in public and in buildings, specific, like in businesses. So like my grocery store, there's even a sign out front. You got to have a mask to come in. So many people inside, even like workers without masks, walking the wrong, like there are arrows, denoting lanes of traffic. Like aisles can only go one way, and the people walking, like mindfully walking, like purposefully walking, like without a mask, going the wrong way, like not giving a shit. Are you guys seeing a ton of that too?
It depends on where I am. Actually,
Mm,
it's interesting. There are some, I kind of have like I would guess, let's say like 5 cities I still in the time of the pandemic regularly frequent. Okay, two of them are Ann Arbor, with famous college town, and Midland, which is home to a large chemical company. There's a large sector of like engineers and scientists. It's a very scientific community, right?
okay.
And in Ann Arbor and Midland, um, both places are, I would say, upwards of 90% masked. And this has been going since like April, right? Taking it super, super seriously. But these are also like what I would consider communities that very much respect the intellectual hierarchy and just um, believe in science in general, right? but I also live in a smaller town that's kind of a suburb that's a lot more religious, a lot more conservative. And it's not just, I'm not making this a political thing, but it's just like um, in the smaller towns or in the less educated places, I'm definitely noticing that people just aren't as concerned.
If you didn't want to make it a political thing, strikes 2 and 3, because I am in the mountains of Western North Carolina, and it's definitely the same group of people are the people who are going out to their trucks with MAGA bumper stickers. Like it's very much a political thing here for where I am. It's very much you're taking my freedom away, you're taking away my rights kind of thing,
Hmm.
and it's like they feel like they're proud that they are standing up for rights by making a parade at the grocery store or whatever.
Yeah, it's it's a silly thing for sure. Just because you have the freedom doesn't mean you have to exercise it at all times, right? So like you can understand you have a freedom and still conform to like um an inconvenience that's good for the whole, right? Just because you're a good person. And you make those freedom sacrifices just because that's a human thing to do. I mean, we're a tribal being. We originally our animal instinct is to look out for the group, right? And it's just like some people they just don't have it in them. It's just almost at this point, it's for me, it's almost antisocial to not be wearing a mask. You know?
Yeah, like again, to get back to like the political thing, like the same people that I see that are saying it's a freedom to not wear a mask, especially it's literally makes it so obvious on Twitter, is they'll talk about how it's a restriction of their right, and then you go to their profile and they have hashtag pro life in like their bio, and it's just like, are you fucking trolling? Like, is this just a joke to you? Because these are completely opposite opinions that you have.
Yeah. I saw it's a really funny meme going around. I'm sure most people have seen where it's some girl's Instagram and like she did the blackout post where
Oh yes.
and then like a couple of posts later, it's her on the 4th of July holding a Trump flag, saying, "Fuck your
Yeah.
feelings, Trump 2020." It's just like, okay, are you just like wherever the wind blows you for the most likes? Because that's what it feels like. And that's just such a shitty. And honestly, so many people live their life that way, dude. So many people right now live their life that way. It's almost gotta be like, it's gotta be like a prison sentence of sorts, being just kind of like subjected to how many likes you can get on something. I could not imagine living that life. And I almost feel bad for him in a sense.
That's a trap that maybe it's just because I'm in more like photography specific circles, but that is a trap that I see so many photographers fall into, of like existing for likes, because especially when it comes to Instagram's all pictures, and so like there are so many people who I went to school with, so many people that I've like met that it's just like post like you're saying, they're living for the likes, and like they don't do like it feels like if they when you meet them and you talk to them, it's like, oh, hiking and outdoors is like 5% of your personality, but according to your Instagram, it's 50% of all you do. And it's just because anytime you step outside you have to take a photo and prove that you were outdoors on a trail, or something. So this notion of living for likes is it's we talked about me and Jeff talked about like social media and being on social media during the pandemic, but there's just something so disgusting about just like especially like when you see maybe like a headline, a current event, and then just willfully ignoring everything about it and just picking one aspect of something to blow out of proportion and appeal to a huge like to a fan base, whether it be to the people like the very pro Trump accounts on Twitter, or to like the accounts that like anything slandering Trump on Twitter. It's just I'm tired of being subjected to my now, like it used to just be like, okay, corporations do it, cool, but now it's just like my fucking friend groups are doing it, and I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think these are the questions that I've been curious about. Is there anything that is on your guys' mind?
Ooh, wow. I'll let Jeff go first. I have a couple I'm thinking of right now.
That I have anything specific. I consider myself more of a reactive force in this, a sous chef, if you will.
Ooh, okay, so ooh. How about I got a question for both of you. Who I guess I'll answer first. Who for you has been the best social media like as far as like, okay, yes, I like how this person is viewing all of this, and just who's been your favorite follow basically during the pandemic?
You
And
know,
maybe not just the pandemic, like pandemic. I kind of say we should just say 2020 in general because it's kind of wrapped up in a couple of different movements at this point, right?
yeah. I think for me, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Hutch, Sean Hutchinson. He used to work for Machinima. He's pretty big in the gaming scene, particularly like Warzone and Call of Duty.
Hmm.
He has been he there was a certain point, I think it was maybe it was slightly before 2016, where he decided that that not talking about politics isn't it doesn't there's no room for that there to intentionally ignore what's happening in the world. And he, going on through the entire presidency, would even have live streams where he's just like opening up anyone into his Discord, bringing anyone on, having a conversation with them about whatever du jour, Trump du jour, or whatever news du jour, whatever the current thing is, and speaking to people about the issues. And there, like, even times where like he would get shout outs on C-SPAN. Like, people like would call into C-SPAN and be like, Sean Hutchinson, he's the voice of reason during all this time on twitch.tv/Hutch. But like, just being able to openly have a dialogue about what's happening, and especially being willing to be like, that is atrocious, that is ridiculous, it is completely unempathetic, or being like, oh, wrong about this, I guess we were wrong about that. So I think for me, and then the combination between that and just beasting in Warzone, I think has been the perfect dichotomy between paying attention, being informed, and having an escape. RJ, I don't think you
Absolutely.
mentioned yours.
Oh, so I guess I got the one follow that has been great is Atlanta rapper Michael Render, otherwise known as Killer Mike.
Yep.
That man,
The way you introduced him.
obviously,
Me
he,
too.
Love the way you introduced him.
I think it's important for like the really sensitive white people to hear Michael Render instead of Killer Mike, just so they don't have the preconceived notions that they always do. But anyways, it's he's obviously kind of went a little viral with that press conference he held, which is
Yeah.
just like such it's almost like that speech he had been preparing his whole life for, you know? So obviously that was extremely powerful and resonated all across America. But his sense of normalcy is great too because he mixes in all these political posts with just like a picture of a very beautiful woman, right? Or just a picture of just a beautiful blunt that he's about to smoke, right? And it's like mixed in with all this like extremely deeply layered, like really, really well thought out political ideology. He's just bringing you back to his culture and the things he loves too. So definitely Killer Mike. I mean, I've been a fan of him for years, so it's really exciting to see him gain the notoriety right now.
I have things to say about Killer Mike, but before I say anything about Killer Mike, Jeff, who has been your voice of reason?
This is maybe not exactly what you were looking for, but are you guys familiar with 538?
Oh, of course, yes.
Like the
So
sorry, go on. Like the isn't that like a news outlet of some kind?
yeah, yeah. So they're very big on data. They've always been big on data. That's their thing. And it started as predominantly sports focused, but They've since branched out into politics and culture and more along those lines. But the key here is that they're not it's not a political outlet. It's they don't present their news in terms of either side of politics. It's just straight data, which I consider myself a big numbers guy and I appreciate that. I want to read about the actual science behind coronavirus or the actual science about they had a good article today about how Biden is winning over Trump so far in terms of polling, in terms of identity politics, but it wasn't a hit piece either way. It was just straight up, this is how we look at it. Here's the polling data behind that, and then explaining to me why that's important and what that means in the context of the election. So I think that they've been great, and some of their contributors obviously have personal opinions either way, but in terms of just interesting and noteworthy and newsworthy information that I know is going to be backed by science, it's excellent. So I think for me, that's been a really great follow.
Hmm.
I really hate the term identity politics. I
Why?
I hate it because, like, if we look at like people like talking about Black Lives Matter specifically as like, oh, you're just it's you're voting about one group of people, and this is not an issue that it stems or it affects it if it can be solved by it surrounds one group of people. This is an American issue. This is not like specifically so I think a lot of things that people try to lump into identity politics are not just things that affect one group of people, one social group. I feel it's an entire American problem, and to give discredit it by saying it's just identity politics, I feel is such a like that's that's such a big part of the problem.
Yeah, and what's I would maybe this is not as a well-informed opinion as like a 538 article, but I would go as far to say is that identity politics typically doesn't have a huge effect on presidential elections, to be completely honest. At least it hasn't recently. Um, what's always the indicator of a president getting reelected? The economy, right? Economy is always number one when it comes to what sectors of politics are going to indicate a victory, right?
Yeah.
And I often think, not just to break it down to issues, but like, I also don't like identity politics as like a concept either. So I'm right there with you. But yeah, I typically don't think identity politics is that strong of an indicator of how successful a candidate would be, but it definitely feels like this is a unique situation in which it's actually going to be the greatest force, you know?
Yeah. Jeff, I'm sorry, was I stepping, were you saying something right there?
No, I was
Okay.
not.
Sorry, I thought maybe I heard a breath.
If you guys disagree with me, I'm totally down to like talk about it, but it's just that's my rudimentary like view of U.S. presidential elections. Is that it always just seems to come down to economy, right? And that everyone just votes with their wallet. So
I think yeah, at a certain point, because I think when people say, are you better off now or 4 years ago, I think a lot of people, the number one thing they think about is, oh, I was really fucking poor 4 years ago, or oh, I had a lot more money 4 years ago. And so I agree with that, and I because I think that financial success is just success in this country. And so I feel as though, yeah, it does always land on the economy because, like you're saying, people, they vote for and whip by and with and to their wallet, like you're mentioning. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I'm just trying not to circle jerk you as much. But to go from talking about identity politics, just to tie this up back with Killer Mike, have you seen on his TV show where this is before, obviously not before the Black Lives Matter movement, but before I think a majority of white people realize that this isn't this is about people not dying. This is about people not getting murdered indiscriminately with no recourse, no justice. But before then, he on his TV show on Netflix, he spent I forget 3 days, maybe a week, only spending in Atlanta, only spending money in the black community, and he couldn't do it. And like he like literally had to sleep on the street because he was like, okay, I'm in Atlanta and I need to get a hotel. All of the hotels are owned by white people. Literally, he couldn't find a place to stay. He could not find a black-owned hotel or anything like that. And just like the different, even went so far as he was in the strip club and an Asian girl came up and was dancing on him. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to give you any money because I'm only spending money in the black community right now. And so,
That's
but
hilarious.
it really proved the point to me about how financial success, about business success, and about how that has not been allowed essentially through gerrymandering, redlining, mass incarceration to the black community. And so yeah, dude, I'm gonna just say something.
I was gonna say, look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar.
Yeah.
You know, what an album for the times.
Ooh. Ooh. Well, I think, unless anybody has anything else, I think that is ending on Killer Mike, and I think it's a call to action, possibly. At least go experience that episode of his show on Netflix. Does anybody have anything that they need to get out on the record?
I have, in the course of the pandemic, recorded 21 wins in the war zone. That's on the record, buddy.
Legend.
That's on the record.
There are
Put
receipts.
this in the history books.
In life, there
listen,
are winners and there are losers, and you are a winner.
I brought home 21 wins with a KD less than 0.75. Let's see another person do that.
Every time I've played with you, you've been a valued member of the squad, RJ. Valued member.
That's why I'm just there for the moral team spirit.
Speaking of, do you guys want to go play some Warzone?
You know I'm always playing Warzone, boy.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you guys taking the time out. It's been a lot of time. Thanks for being patient, getting up to the recording, and I appreciate you guys being on. I will have links to whatever the social medias that you guys would like in the description below. But thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it. And this has been episode 3.